Why is this woman terrified of the eclipse? Well, as a child, Deanna Blackman had one of the most horrific accounts with the unknown on 2 occasions. Both times it was during an eclipse. What I'm about to share with you today is a chilling tale of the supernatural and explains why this woman is terrified of them. Ever since Deanna Blackman was a child, she had this strange memory that she could never entirely understand. She vividly remembers being scared to close her eyes at night because of what she would describe as shadowy figures. At least that's how she would refer to them. They would reach out from behind the curtains in her bedroom. Even her own father can recollect her mentioning these particular incidents. These shadow figures were exceedingly tall. All she could see from her bed was their outstretched arms reaching for her, accompanied by a sensation of complete fear and total paralysis. However, this incident didn't wholly start until the first eclipse. Deanna can remember it vividly. She was 12 years old when the first experience happened. It was May 4th, 1985. And going by my research, I can see a lunar eclipse this day, but how this affected the sighting is beyond me. Deanna claimed that she was lying in bed that night and the soft light flew from the sky outside her window. She describes it as being so bright that it was nearly blinding. And then suddenly, it went out. Afterwards, she had this chilling sensation all over her body, like she was not alone. And worse, the entities were in her room and out there to hurt her. She recalls then seeing 3 elongated, oversized beings walking towards her in her own bedroom with outstretched arms, trying to communicate with her. She describes being so vividly terrified that her entire body seized up. Upon reaching her bed, she recalls blacking out, and when waking up the following morning, she had this burning sensation all over her entire body. Her skin was even red in certain spots, but there were no physical signs that she had ever been hurt. For a couple of days after this first experience, her body ached miserably, and she felt like she had been burned, like she had stood too close to a large roaring fire. Now, she initially told her father about it, seeking solace and comfort. Still, like most parents, he ultimately wrote her off as having a nightmare and assured her that things like that don't exist. On random nights of the week following this, she would see these entities hiding in her room, almost blending in to be a part of the surroundings. Sometimes they would be behind the curtains, other times she said they would come out and try to grab her. As she got older and saw what a gray was, referring to gray aliens, the ones with large black eyes, she said they looked very similar, but were much more corporeal looking, like they were made of wispy shadows. She described how they would talk to her, not like you and I, but more like telepathically communicating, telling her all sorts of horrible things about her and her family and what they would do. But she never went into detail about what. The experiences continued until finally heightening around September or October. She recalls the worst event of the series happening around Halloween. Now, according to my research, ladies and gentlemen, October 28th, 1985, the year this happened, was the second lunar eclipse of that year. Now, she never specified the date, just that it was around Halloween, so this would make sense. By this point, she and her family had completely relocated to a new city because her father had taken a new job with a new company. They had moved right around Labor Day, or so I'm told, and after that, all the activity and sightings seemed to have stopped completely. She was in a new school, making new friends, and things were going relatively well. Until this night. Deanna recalls lying in her bed trying to fall asleep when she suddenly felt this paralyzing sensation come over her entire body. She began to panic because she realized she could not feel her arms and legs. She described it as similar to your limbs falling asleep, but much worse. The next thing she knows, she can hear the strange whispering sound, is how she described it, and then these 3 elongated, shadowy entities appearing in her room once more, moving toward her. What's more horrific is she described as these beings materialized, the environment around her and her room began to change and morph into something else. She described it as a cavern, but futuristic looking. She was horrified and tried to scream, but nothing could come out. One of these beings got close enough to her and put its hand on her foot, where she describes feeling a searing, burning pain. She described it as the worst pain she'd ever felt and nearly passed out. This is when she would begin to fade in and out of consciousness, and there were times she would describe going from her bed to lying on what she describes as a tall, long metal table. Then she recalls more of these beings standing around her, probably 6 or 7, if not more. They had odd machinery that she describes would poke and prod her body. She felt a lot of burning, a lot of stabbing and poking. She described it as like her spirit was being pulled out of her body. And the next thing she knew, she woke up in her bed and it was morning. Completely traumatized by the past night's events, she ran screaming to her father in tears, completely broken down. She had a pretty severe burn mark all along her ankle and foot where this thing had touched her, and it burned to the touch. Her father grew gravely concerned, put her in therapy, in which she slowly started to remember more and more of these experiences that had happened over the past 6 months. She described that at the time it was going on, these experiences would happen, and then it's like she would forget about them for a short time. It's hard for her to describe accurately. However, after that last event, her great aunt passed away shortly after. Now, it was some time before Thanksgiving of that year. She was close with her aunt, and the death was hard on her and the whole family. Now, years later, after graduating high school, she went to live at her uncle's house, which was very close to her college campus for the school year. He kept her aunt's old stuff up in the attic. And one day she's up there rummaging around looking for something, and she ran across a couple of boxes of her aunt's things. And it turns out that her aunt was really big into witchcraft and black magic. She never went into detail about what she found. Still, she hinted at spell books and other black magic paraphernalia. She said the second she touched them, she got an extremely bad feeling, almost similar to her feelings when these experiences happened. They frightened her so much that she began having sleeping problems at her uncle's house. She began feeling those sensations of being watched, hearing whispering noises, and presences that were unseen and in the same room. But she never saw anything. Shortly after winter break, she moved in with a friend on campus. After that, things seemed to sort themselves out, and she had no more experiences or encounters. Now that she is much older, she 100% believes that whatever entities these things plagued her for those 6 months were somehow attached to her aunt. She could feel it. The real question is, why did these strange things happen on and around the eclipse? Let's go back in time a little bit. The moon has always been something of a fascination to humans throughout history. Various cultures have so much folklore and legends surrounding the moon and its effects. In fact, a lunar eclipse has been known throughout history to create confusion and fear and even impact major catastrophic events throughout time and history. It is said that eclipses have even influenced the outcomes of war. In 585 BC, during the Battle of Hales, an eclipse took place, causing widespread panic and confusion amongst the soldiers in battle. All the soldiers stopped fighting as they were plunged into darkness and looked up at the sky with a mixture of fear and astonishment. You have to remember that during this time, people generally didn't understand what caused eclipses. They were believed to be a sign of judgment and bad omens from the gods. The Medes and the Lydians were not sure what was happening. However, what's very interesting about this is that even though the war or battle was put on pause, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus claimed that it had already been predicted by Thales of Miletus, a Greek philosopher. Another combat took place in the 6th year, in the course of which, just as the battle was growing warm, day was on a sudden changed into night. This event had been foretold by Thales of Miletus, who forewarned the Ionians of it, fixing for it the very year in which it actually took place. The Medes and the Lydians, when they observed the change, ceased fighting and were alike anxious to have terms of peace agreed on. Assuming that the prediction is accurate, it would make it the first known prediction of an eclipse to have ever happened in our history. However, there's still controversy. There's debate on whether or not his forecast was even accurate or if it even happened in the first place. At the time of this supposed prediction, the argument was that astronomy knowledge wasn't sufficient enough at the time to predict such an eclipse. There's also little to no information about how Thales made the prediction. However, we do know that there was a solar eclipse on that day, and it did affect the battle itself. As far as if Thales actually predicted it, well, that's entirely up for debate. However, none can argue the eclipse's effects on these frightened, confused men, believing they were receiving a celestial message from the gods. Remember that for hundreds of years, if not thousands, people thought that UFOs and aliens were also entities from the celestial kingdom, gods themselves. And this segues to our next part. Now, this extraordinary sighting of a UFO happened in Mexico City in 1991. In fact, it was so significant that thousands of people reported seeing it. It is one of the strangest mass sightings of UFOs in the entire country. Look, Mexico and South America is already UFO hotspot rich with sightings of the unknown and unexplained, but how do you argue with that many eyewitnesses who all corroborate the exact same thing? It was July 11th of 1991. Thousands and thousands of people in Mexico City gathered around to see a solar eclipse. Two notable individuals in particular was a journalist by the name of Jamie Mawson, the producer, host, and director of Mexico's version of 60 Minutes, and a TV executive named Guillermo Aragon. However, during the actual solar eclipse, they noticed the strange disc shape in the sky. They described it as shining and metallic and recorded it with the eclipse. The tape was then passed to Mawson. The video then aired for all to see, and only 8 days later, there were tons and tons of callers who claimed they had spotted and recorded the same thing during the eclipse. This information makes Deanna Blackman's story in the first part of the video all the more strange and chilling. What is it about the eclipse that brings these entities out? Eyewitnesses describe the object as strange, sometimes hovering, sometimes not, and leaving a vaporous trail behind it with 3 blinking lights. As daylight approached and the eclipse ended, the object vanished as well. In fact, a 19-year-old student named Eric Aguilar caught the strange sight on camera. Like many others, he was filming the eclipse from a rooftop when him and his friends spotted the object. He saw a bright white light that grew in size and intensity the longer they looked at it. He estimated it to be around 60 miles away from Mexico City. And there was yet another family, the Breton family, who also reported seeing a similar object in Puebla, which is roughly 80 miles away from Mexico City. Then you have the businessman Luis Lara, who also recorded a similar object on tape while filming the eclipse. Are you guys starting to see a connection here? It's not a good one. Now, many also describe strange pulsating movements from this unidentified object and even a strange wave-like disturbance following its wake. Or perhaps it was the same one being seen from different places. It's hard to tell. Remember that dozens of videos featuring the same bizarre object were sent in that gave them multiple angles and distances of the initial sighting. It's truly bizarre. The telephone lines blew up. 40,000 calls all at the same time. Then the system was completely shut out. We received more than 15 videos, and we now know for sure that at least 7 of them we can see the same ship that was recorded by Aragon. In fact, these UFO sightings became such a hit that a mass wave of panic followed suit. As a matter of fact, only 2 months after, another object was seen at a Mexico City military air show, which only heightened things. An engineer by the name of Vincent Sanchez spotted this object while filming the air show. I was following one of the planes and I saw a shiny dot in the camera. It didn't fly like a plane. It was undulating. I didn't know what it was, so I let the planes go off and I focused more on this shiny dot in the sky. What I saw was a bright round object, about 10 meters in diameter. It was made of silver, was shining very brightly and reflected the sunlight a lot. The object appeared undulated and moved around quickly. But wait folks, there's more to the story. The following year, the same object would appear during the same air show. Maybe it likes attention. However, it behaved differently. It seemed to vanish suddenly into thin air after descending rapidly. In 1993, it would be spotted again flying very close to a group of choppers. Many people attach these events to the mass sighting because it appears to be the same object. However, I think I would disagree because if you look at many UFO sightings, they are all very similar. So does that mean they're all connected somehow and are seeing the same thing? Who knows? But folks, not everything is as concrete, check and mate as we would like it to. All the different footage captured on July 11th of 1991 has been hotly debated for years and years. A notable astronomer by the name of Tim Printy actually came up with a pretty compelling theory that the object that was being seen was actually Venus. He even presented evidence in which he mentioned that the object didn't seem to be moving in any of the videos. He then related the object's position relative to other planets and showed that it matched exactly where Venus should be. He mentioned that no Mexican astronomer had reported seeing any UFO or anything else during the eclipse despite all the footage going around. He then concluded his theory by saying that as soon as the eclipse ended and the sun came out, the object vanished just as it should be. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Now, things get a bit more complicated though, because according to some, the occurrence that happened in 1991 was actually a Mayan prophecy that was supposed to be fulfilled over 1,200 years ago. Well, there's not a lot of public information about them. Lee and Britt Elders are a couple who firmly believe this. According to them and their research, they are very insistent that there are ancient documents from the Mayans that predicted the exact date and time at which aliens would land in Mexico City. And guys, can you guess what that date is? Exactly, July 11th, 1991. So this couple, Lee and Britt, declared that these aliens who would show up were to act as a global change and bring out a cosmic encounter with Star Masters, to quote them verbatim. The couple even has videos discussing this, titled Messengers of Destiny, Voyagers of the Sixth Sun, and Masters of the Stars. All of their research and work is centered around the events of July 11th, 1991. Now keep in mind that Lee and Britt Elders were pretty public about this information and did not hide it. It's not like they were in some conspiracy basement dwelling just coming up with these random theories. Tim Printy, though, went ahead and challenged those beliefs, shooting them down as nonsense, saying this: "Not only do the elders state that Venus was a UFO, but they also make a profound statement that the Mayans predicted the arrival of the UFOs. Exactly when did the Maya predict such an event? The elders state that there are several ancient documents that state this. However, is there any basis for such a claim? The elders rarely, if ever, give details. They seem to expound on New Age mysticism, trying to link statements from various documents in order to create some strange prediction to meet their needs. Are their statements correct? Are these source documents accurate? The credibility of the elders is important to understand how accurately they represented the UFOs shown in those videos. Despite a wealth of evidence that Venus was the likely culprit in many of these videos, the elders went out of their way to create a narrative that describes alien visitation. The mixing and matching of Mayan and Aztec myths and then trying to make some form of prediction made by the Maya is another case of the elders trying to deceive the viewers of real facts. The Mexico City Eclipse UFO story is nothing but a New Age myth generated by a couple of con artists who rely on the viewer to be uninformed and willing to believe the most ridiculous claims. The Messengers of Destiny / Masters of the Stars / Voyagers of the Sixth Sun prediction is nothing but a New Age myth designed to make money. So again, guys, what's your opinion on this? Were all those people actually seeing Venus, or was there something more otherworldly happening that the elders might have tapped into? In the middle of the Peloponnesian War, around 413 BC, we saw a long conflict between Sparta and Athens in Greece. Something strange took place. The end of August drew near, and an army of Athenians led by Nicias found themselves in a serious predicament. This was a time of much bloodshed and conflict as they had been fighting against the city-state of Syracuse in Sicily. They had already lost hundreds of soldiers and several ships were destroyed. The Athenian army had their morale broken down and they were weary. Many soldiers at this time were sick, wounded, or weak. Many of these soldiers had also left to join the opposing forces. Nicias arrived at the choice to stop the mission and make an exit, pondering a brief retreat to gather his units and strengthen his forces. His clever scheme was to quietly whisk away his leftover soldiers by using the few naval ships they still had under the cover of darkness. The strategy would have splendidly worked if it hadn't been for a surprising event in the sky. However, things would take a different turn, ladies and gentlemen. During the evening of their departure, Nicias and his entire army witnessed something spectacular: an eclipse. They saw the moon turn a dark crimson red, which struck fear into the hearts of all Athenians. Nicias was terrified and understood this as a sign from the gods of impending doom and death. Very quickly did he seek advice from his counselors and priests. The conclusion was that this was a bad omen, a warning from the gods themselves. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, Plutarch's Greek historical text understood this event as a sign from the heavens. The moon itself to be darkened, how that could come about, and how, on the sudden, a broad full moon should lose her light and show such various colors was not easy to be comprehended. They concluded it to be ominous and a divine intimation of some heavy calamities. Now, if you were an Athenian soldier and saw this ominous blood-red sign in the sky, wouldn't you be terrified? Because of this, they decided to further delay their plans of any more military action, and as a matter of fact, as history goes, these Spartans and Syracuse took full advantage of the fear and hesitation that the Athenians had. They had initiated a massive battle at sea, costing the Athenians many lives. They were nearly completely obliterated. The only reason they weren't entirely wiped out was because they had Etruscan reinforcements. Their backs against the wall in the harbor, they had no other choice but to try and flee, which they would fall right into the trap of Spartans. They managed to make their way a few miles to the Anapo River, where they would be either killed or captured. Nicias was executed, and the Athenian grip on Sicily had been weakened. But was this all attributed to the sign of the crimson eclipse? Let's jump back in time just a little bit more, going about 80 or so years back. We all know Alexander the Great, or at least most of us do. He found himself in a very odd situation. He was in the middle of organizing his army for a crucial battle, the Battle of Gaugamela, to take out Emperor Darius III. The odds at this point were significantly stacked against Alexander. The Persians possessed a much larger army that had far superior weaponry. Many at the time believed that the decision to go against them in war was utterly ridiculous and a death wish at best. However, check this out. As the armies began to approach right near an Assyrian village, something happens. A sign of the gods, they thought. A celestial omen, a total and complete lunar eclipse. They all watched to the sky, watching the moon turn blood red, and once again appeared as if the sky was foreshadowing the death to come. Many soldiers who were astronomers interpreted this as a divine indication that their enemies would be dead by the end of the night. However, while this has had its significance in history, is this necessarily a supernatural event, or was it just believed to be that? Now, I'm sure some of you are watching this thinking, how have you not even begun to talk about any of the biblical prophecies that revolve around blood moons, etc.? But that is such a deep topic, it needs more than just a short segment in one video. That, my friends, alone is a lot to unpack. Of course, eclipses have come to play in many other historical moments. Still, I just thought that these two in particular were very interesting because it kind of showcases humankind's perception of what we believe to be signs from above, specifically eclipses, and how there is believed to be such a solid supernatural connection with them. It is an event that causes otherworldly entities to show up, or paranormal activity to increase, or to be taken as a literal omen from the heavens. So I want to ask you, the viewer, we now know the science behind eclipses and how they work, but is there any supernatural connection to them? Let me know what you think. And since you made it to the end of the video, I want you to go ahead and comment down below, blood moon, so I know who made it to the end of the video. And if you guys enjoyed today's episode, be sure to go ahead and smack that like and subscribe button for more content just like this one. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll catch you all in the very next episode.